Hi, everyone. My name is Devin, and I work with the Worcester Public Library. And today I'm very excited to be interviewing Judy Palken. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Devin. How are you?
Good. It's nice to see you again.
Very nice to see you.
Judy is a registered dietitian who lives in Northborough, and she's been teaching nutrition classes at the Worcester Public Library now for about a year and a half. She has a master's degree in clinical nutrition from Cornell University and has worked in Boston at Brigham and Women's Hospital and the New England Deaconess Hospital with a specialty in cardiac nutrition. For many years, she worked at UMass Medical School in Worcester, involved in nutrition and health research. She now has her own small company teaching nutrition classes in the community. She says what she loves doing is gathering and analyzing information pertaining to diet and health and trying really hard to present it in a manner that is helpful and understandable and hopefully enjoyable to those who attend her classes. And as someone who has attended her classes, I think she does a great job.
Thanks, Devin.
Yeah. So I've been taking a lot of your classes over the past year and a half, and all this time I've wondered, when did you first become interested in nutrition?
Thank you for having me, Devin. Yeah, I can pinpoint that to an exact year, an exact semester. I was in my senior year of undergrad college and I was a biology major, not quite sure what I was going to do with it. And I loved botany. And anyway, the first day of my last semester, I was walking to an elective I had signed up for. And one of my classmates passed by me and said, "Did you hear they got a nutrition class?" So they didn't have a nutrition department there, but there was a visiting professor who was going to teach this one nutrition class. It sounded interesting, so I signed up for it, and it actually ended up changing the course of my life because I ended up really liking it. I loved learning about the little substances in food that we need, like vitamins and minerals and protein, and I loved learning about the fad diets of the day. And so at some point in the middle of the semester, I went to the professor and asked what kind of a job I could get in this field. And he told me I'd really have to go on and get a degree in it. So I did. I applied to graduate school and got my master's degree in clinical nutrition. And one of the things I remember well about that was learning about diabetes. So I had this grandmother who I loved very much, who had type 2 diabetes, very common. And I didn't know what that was looking back on it. All I knew is grandma had to eat according to a certain pattern. You know, she tried, and she wasn't supposed to have too many desserts. But I found it to be fascinating to learn what diabetes really was and what causes it and how we should treat it. And of course, that's our thinking on that has evolved a lot since I was in graduate school. And that's one of the things I really like about my field and keeps me engaged is that I get to keep on learning. The science evolves and I like to try to keep up and, to take that information and pass it on to people. One of the things that intrigues me the most and that I love learning about and telling people about is the really healthy compounds in plant foods. We call them phytochemicals, the compounds that are so good for our health that are in plant foods, and you don't get them from supplements. You need to eat the whole foods. So I love that I get to help people. I hope I help people. And I love that I get to use what I know to try to feed my family well.
Well, it seems like it's almost destiny that your friend walked by at that moment and mentioned the nutrition class in college.
Yeah, it kind of was.
One thing I really enjoy when you're teaching the nutrition classes for the library is when you use slides and show images of, different foods or dietary information. You also include pictures of famous artworks. So I was curious, what inspired you to link food and nutrition, or I'm sorry, nutrition and art together?
Yeah, sure. I'm so glad you're asking this, Devin, because of all the things I do with my work, this might be the thing that makes me the happiest, this linking of nutrition and art. So what has happened is in recent years, I've become really, I have a great appreciation for fine art paintings. I love the Impressionists. I love the Post-Impressionists. Um, And I've been fortunate to do some traveling and to go to some great museums. And what I've noticed is that there's so many beautiful paintings of food, just amazing. And not just food, but also scenes of kitchens and dining room tables and of people sitting around enjoying food while they enjoy each other's company. So at some point I decided, oh, I'll incorporate one painting into each of my classes because this just seemed like a natural fit. And I think I was teaching at the Northborough Free Library at that time. So every time I had a class, in my handout or in my slides, I would put in one painting. And at first that was almost always a Cezanne because I had discovered the Cezannes and those beautiful still lifes of the apples and the oranges cascading over a tablecloth. And I loved them. And then now that's grown. And so sometimes when I do a class, there will be 10 or 20 or more paintings. It totally depends on the topic. And I keep finding more and more paintings that I love, but maybe I can tell you about a couple of my favorites.
Yeah, please do.
Thanks. Yeah. So there's this Monet painting called Jar of Peaches, and it's just so striking. It's not what we think of when we think of Monet. It's not Impressionist. It was before he really got into, it was before the Impressionist period. Monet was only in his 20s. And it's this beautiful jar of peaches on a very shiny surface. I don't know whether it was granite or marble, but I like it so much that I just bought a print of it. So there's many, many beautiful paintings of fruit and vegetables. When I'm talking about vegetables, for example, there's a Clara Peters painting of an artichoke, and it's with cheese and some cherries. So she was a painter in Antwerp in the 1600s. Not very many women professional painters there at that time, but she was one. And the detail in that painting is just stunning. It's like you're there. And I spend a lot of time talking about how we can control our intake of carbohydrates. And for those sessions, I often turn to the Van Gogh paintings of vegetables, of starchy vegetables like potatoes. He's got a lot of amazing paintings of potatoes, of all things. And there's one of potatoes in a yellow bowl that is really unusual that I really like. For when I'm talking about sugar and how we can moderate our intake of sugar, which a lot of us need to do, Renoir had a whole series of paintings of sugar bowls that I feel like he painted just for me, for my classes, which of course is crazy. Chaim Soutine had many beautiful paintings, and one of my favorites of all time is actually his still life with a soup tureen. And it's just very basic, humble kitchen implements, some blue and white dishes, one of which has a scallion on one of the plates and a bottle of wine. And I like to use that to make the point that even the humble things in our kitchen can make us happy and can make a nice place setting, and that's important. And I keep finding more. So recently I was at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, and I came across this painting by Antoine Vallon. He's a French painter who I had never heard of. And it's called Mound of Butter. And it's a painting of a giant mound of butter. Anyone who might be listening to this should look it up. It's really fascinating to look at how it can be so interesting, this mound of butter. And while I haven't used it yet, the next time I teach anything about cardiovascular nutrition, that mound of butter is so going to be there. So I continue to do this because I think, one, it shows us how beautiful food can be. It's just amazing. And I think it helps me to show the topics I'm talking about in a slightly different light. I know that I have seen people's faces light up sometimes when I show these paintings. And, these are people who aren't necessarily interested in art. It's just that they're so beautiful and amazing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the artworks that you show are really perfect because if it's an apple or a potato or something that we think of as everyday, seeing it in that new light as something worthy of being painted and preserved in art, it just makes me appreciate my own food more. So I think it's a great pairing.
Oh, thank you, Devin. I appreciate that.
So this winter, along with your usual nutrition classes every month, you're also offering a series for people with type 2 diabetes or for people who are at risk for developing diabetes. What advice would you have for someone who's been newly diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic?
Yeah, it's a serious diagnosis, and I would say put down the soda. No, really, people have to pay attention when they get that diagnosis, or if they're told they have pre-diabetes. But the good news is you can control this. In almost all cases, type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes can be controlled with diet and activity. So yes, you will need to control your portions of high carb foods and especially limit those sugar sweetened beverages. Really just avoid them. Drink water. It's good advice for anyone. And another thing I would say that is so important, and I try to emphasize, is choose whole grains. Whole grains, I like to say, are not a nutritional neutral. Foods like brown rice and oats and quinoa and whole wheat, they are actually really good for us. And that goes so much for diabetics. They really can help and people with cardiovascular disease, whereas refined grains are bad. They're nutritionally devoid and they raise the blood sugar almost as if a person was just eating sugar. I would also say to a diabetic, eat lots of veggies. They can help and they're good for all of us. And finally, if I can give one more quick bit of advice,
Mhm.
um, move. Everybody, with diabetes, everybody should just move. Physical activity is like free medicine for diabetics.
Well, it definitely sounds like good advice, not just for people with diabetes, but for all of us. Another thing that you mentioned in one of your descriptions for the diabetes sessions is that there's a prevalence of diabetes among Americans, so much so that it's in the millions, which I probably read somewhere, but that really surprised me. And then you said that it doesn't have to be that way. So I was wondering if you could just explain that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. It definitely doesn't have to be that way because what we know now is that diabetes, and we're talking here about type 2 diabetes, which is most diabetes, is a disease very much related to lifestyle. A lot of people don't know, but before about 1900, which isn't that long ago, diabetes was pretty rare. Physicians could go their whole career and see no cases or only a couple cases, depending on where they lived and how urban and crowded it was. Now it's an epidemic. It started being described that way in around the 1920s by Elliot Jocelyn. And now we all know people with type 2 diabetes. It's just everywhere. Data from the CDC from just last year tells us that the prevalence in the US of diabetes, again, it's mostly type 2, is over 34 million cases. And of prediabetes, which is just what it sounds like, the prevalence is something like 88 million. Those numbers are astounding. This is an epidemic, and the complications of diabetes are really serious. So we have to take it seriously. It's due in large part to our lifestyle, the amount of highly processed food that just seems normal to people now, and in particular, sugar and refined carbohydrates that everybody's eating. Now, I just want to add that, yes, people need to be responsible for their own diet, but it's not entirely a matter of personal responsibility. We have a culture in which corporations can sell us these foods and market them to people that don't know any better, like children. And that is really wrong. A lot of these foods you can't even really call food, they're just that bad. And we have a healthcare system that unfortunately doesn't place enough emphasis on preventive measures like eating right and getting physical activity.
Well, I think, I've heard in the past, and you probably have too, there are people out there who just think they're too busy to think about that kind of thing. They're busy with work, they're busy with their family, and it is easier to pick up like a frozen dinner or go through the fast food takeout. So What would you say to someone who thinks they're just too busy to think about nutrition?
So, yeah, we probably all say that sometimes. I know I have. There's some days when it just feels like, how on earth am I going to even think about dinner? But if we're saying that a lot, if we're chronically too busy to think about good nutrition, then our lives are out of balance. Because, we take care of a lot of things. If we have a job outside the home, we take care of our work. If, we take care of our families, we take care of our pets, we take care of our cars, for heaven's sakes. And all this is good. It's as it should be, but we also need to take care of ourselves. And part of that is nourishing ourselves with good food. Um, we need to buy and prepare healthy whole foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, fish, legumes, and on, the good foods. And it doesn't have to take all of our time. Not everybody wants to or needs to become a gourmet cook, but we need to take the time to procure and prepare good, healthy foods, or else we're not taking care of ourselves. And I'd also like to mention that very often that taking care of ourselves nutritionally looks like you should have more broccoli. That's just the reality. But it also can look like you should have that piece of cake, because eating is about pleasure, and that piece of cake or that ice cream or whatever it is might be really good for your soul at the time. And that's important too.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people would be happy to hear that. I think when they hear nutrition, they think, oh no, I can't have any of these things like a cake. So knowing that you can balance the two is positive, I think.
I believe that very much. We do not have to give up all of our treats. We just need to be selective.
Right.
Yeah.
So if there was one dietary change you could ask more people to make, if there is just like one you could pinpoint, what would that be?
Sure. Yes, there is, because it's kind of all encompassing. We need in our nutritional choices and our shopping choices to take into account the health of the planet, because a healthy planet is healthy us. We can't be healthy without a healthy planet. Our planet is hurting so much right now. The changing climate, increasing temperatures are having terrible effects. There's a crisis with plastics in our environment. Plastics are everywhere. They're clogging up the waterways. The oceans have so much plastic in them, and plastics are showing up in really scary places that we would not want them to be. The soil in many places is becoming degraded because of farming practices where one crop like corn is grown over and over. There's a problem with the loss of pollinators. So our food choices and our shopping choices and how we opt not to waste food can all have a big effect on this. One thing that everybody should try to do is to eat more plant-based. It does not have to be all or nothing. People do not have to say, okay, I have to be a vegetarian, unless you want to. It's a great way to eat if you want to, but we don't have to do that. We can just kind of shift towards a more plant-based way of eating. And, it's called being a flexitarian, and that's what I try to do. It might be that several meals a week, you just make a point of having it be all plant food, or maybe you add some yogurt, but getting away from having a lot of meat. It's really, really important.
I actually just saw an article yesterday on the news about being a flexitarian. So it must be an important thing people are thinking about right now.
Absolutely, it's very important, but more people need to take it into account.
Yeah, for sure. So I happen to know that you have a Facebook group called Crystal Clear Nutrition, and there are always really good recipes posted on there. I was curious what inspired you to start that group.
Oh yeah, that came from something really fun. So I was working at UMass Medical School in Worcester several years ago. I worked there for many years, but several years ago I was given the opportunity to teach these classes called healthy living classes. And the topics would be healthy eating, physical activity, how to manage your time and reduce stress, and how to get good sleep, and on and on. So these were 8-week cycles that went on for about 4 years. And sadly, they're no longer being given because it was funded by research and the research ended. I really miss these classes. But anyway, what would happen is people would really bond together. We'd become really attached in the group to, all of them to each other, and me to them. And people started asking how we could stay in touch. So I started the Facebook health and nutrition group, and I post healthy recipes, and I post articles about just general good nutrition, and I post my paintings that I love so much, and a lot of things like that. And sometimes people respond and post things of their own. And I know that some people just like to look at the postings, but I'm happy to have anyone there. And by the way, just for anyone who might be listening to this, you do not have to have been in those healthy living classes to be in this Facebook group. You just have to be on Facebook, and you search Crystal Clear Nutrition Northborough MA, and you ask to be admitted, and I'm happy to let you in and to join into this group. I love having people there. So thanks for asking, Devin.
Well, one thing I really enjoy about the group is the recipes that are posted. A lot of times I can get intimidated by a new recipe if it has a lot of ingredients listed, but the ones on your group tend to be, simpler, but also healthy. And the photos look delicious. So it always inspires me to try new vegetables, which I think is important.
Oh, thank you, Devin. Thank you for that. And then if I might add, that kind of brings me to the name of my group and my business, which is Crystal Clear Nutrition. It's named that for 2 reasons. I think that those of us in the business of giving nutrition advice need to keep it crystal clear. It needs to be simple, or people are not going to follow it. I try to help people to set simple goals in my classes. And I try to keep my recipes simple. I too do not gravitate towards really complex recipes in general, every now and then, but in general, I like them to be simple so that I can make them over and over and enjoy them. And also, Crystal Clear Nutrition, on a personal note, is named that because my mother's maiden name was Crystal. My parents gave that to me as a middle name. So it means a lot to me to have that be, the word crystal, be in my business name. And I feel like it honors my mother that I did that.
That's fantastic. It has a purpose of making things clear to people who want to learn about nutrition, but also has a family tie. That's really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. Thanks, Devin.
So I was wondering, now that we've talked about all these healthy things, if as a dietitian, you're willing to share with us what one of your guilty pleasure foods is.
Absolutely. I would be really happy to. I'm going to be honest and say I love sweets. I do. It's a challenge for me, just like a lot of people, to moderate them. And, to be specific, I love cookies. I love really good homemade cookies and, oatmeal raisin or chocolate chip. I do like to bake them myself. I do that, from time to time. And, yes, I like to try to give a nod to health. I do. I use whole wheat flour. I throw in things like flaxseed and wheat germ and oat bran and nuts and all kinds of things, to the point where my husband will say, will you stop doing that? They're just cookies. And he's right. In the end, they're just cookies, and they're a treat, and we should enjoy them.
Okay, now I think me and all the listeners are thinking about cookies. Well, if you've enjoyed this conversation with Judy as much as I have, make sure to sign up for her upcoming classes. There's one this coming Saturday on the 9th at 2:30, and she's going to be talking about healthy planet eating, which will cover making sustainable and ethical food choices. And her next diabetes session is coming up on Thursday, the 21st at 2:30. Judy and I hope to see you there.
Thank you so much, Devin. It's been so nice to talk to you.
Thank you. See you next time.
Take care. Bye.